Welcome to the ultimate Humankind cultural wonder tier list. As you may know, these wonders are unlocked at each era, you buy them with influence, and then you unlock the exclusive property rights to build said wonder. It acts as a shared project as well, so all cities can get involved. For this tier list, I'll be largely considering their power level, but also when you get it, what is the opportunity cost of it, does it have any synergies, those kinds of things. It's also important to note there are two distinct types. You have base level wonders. All of them provide 20 stability and 100 fame, and then you have some that count also as holy sites, providing an additional 20 faith and stability. Let's crack straight in. Starting off in the ancient era, we have the Pyramid of Giza. This bad boy is a standard wonder with an incredibly powerful unique effect, providing a 25% discount on district costs for the rest of the game. You will absolutely make buck on this bad boy. It only costs 1400 production to produce, and because it's an ancient era wonder, you'll have that 25% discount on districts forever. The Pyramid of Giza is a fantastic S-tier, best tier wonder. I have nothing more to say on it. It is just exclusively good. Always. Next up, we have the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, a slightly more complex wonder in the ancient era. It is a standard wonder. Its unique effects require certain conditions. It must be placed on a luxury resource deposit. Here's looking at you, Sage, or whatever you've got. It acts as a wondrous manufactory, those things that we don't get until way later in the game when we get patronage. That means you will receive the wondrous effect from a luxury rather than the standard benefit. However, there are a couple of things to note here. Unlike a normal luxury manufactory, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon doesn't have any tech requirements, right? So you don't need patronage to get the effect. However, you do still need to control more than half of the luxury in order for the wondrous effect to take place. In general, this isn't too difficult to do. There's probably a luxury in the early game that you have majority of, i.e. 3 out of 6, or of course you can trade for them to pick them up. However, you may not necessarily have your first choice. It is for that reason that I rank the Hanging Gardens of Babylon at an A tier. However, I cannot stress how powerful they are, okay? They are absolutely S tier in terms of power level, but a couple of other considerations. You do need to have majority of a luxury, and in the ancient era that may not be easy. You may not get your first choice, so you may have to settle for, say, a food wondrous effect, which is not as good as a productive one. Because there are just a couple of limitations involved, I'm placing it at the A tier, but let me be very clear, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon is super, super good, and definitely an S tier if you can build it on an industrial luxury. Others perhaps as well, but in particular those industrial ones. It can actually overpower the Pyramids of Giza in that case, but because of those slight limitations, I'm placing it at the A tier. Stonehenge is our first standard wonder that also counts as a holy site, meaning it provides an additional 20 stability, 20 faith, and it acts as a holy site where other tenets or civics come into play. So if your holy sites are generating an additional 5 science, this will do that as well. What does it do uniquely though? Well, you get plus 10 food per co-religionist state. Those states that are following the same religion as you, you'll also receive plus 5 stability from them. On your capital, you'll also receive plus 5% food. Note it's a percentage increase. And an additional plus 5 stability for empires that follow the same religion as you. Therefore, there's some synergy here within Stonehenge because it acts as a holy site, so you can ramp up your religious pressure much faster than anyone else if you pick up Stonehenge. Stonehenge is the wonder to cement your early game religion, and the early game is really where religions are made or broken. If you can overpower everyone else very quickly, you shouldn't struggle for the rest of the game to keep that religious pressure, and you're getting plus 5% food for everyone else who's following your religion. So in a normal game, you can pick up plus 25% food. It's dang good, actually. In fact, in many ways, This is a very, very powerful wonder. However, I have to strip some points back from it because those prerequisites can be really hard to gather. If another empire is steaming ahead of you, if another empire is focusing on religion or using cultures that generate faith, you can still fall behind even though you have Stonehenge. Therefore, in the right cases, Stonehenge is incredibly powerful, but its abilities, its unique effects, really do rely on your religion being dominant. It is for that reason that, unfortunately, while I acknowledge the power of Stonehenge, I'm ranking it at a C tier, below average as far as I'm concerned. And finally, in the ancient era, we have the Temple of Artemis. It's a standard wonder that also acts as a holy site, providing you with that extra faith and stability. Its unique effect gives plus 10 health regeneration on units. Your units will also ignore movement penalties through forests. For those unfamiliar, forests slow you down at twice the normal rate, so you use 2 movement points to move through a forest tile, whereas normal tiles, of course, would only require 1. That effect is quite nice. You can clearly see it's tailored towards slightly more aggressive empires with that extra health regeneration and that faster movement. However, you could also use that faster movement to your advantage for things like exploration and so on and so forth. It does also count as a holy site, which does stack into its favor. Of course, as I've mentioned earlier, you can also stack those holy site bonuses, so it's something to bear in mind. Overall, the Temple of Artemis provides benefits that you can use immediately. There really aren't many preconditions, unlike Stonehenge. It's relatively universal, however, it's not particularly powerful. For that reason, I'm ranking the Temple of Artemis at a B tier. Next up, we have a bronze giant. It's the Colossus of Rhodes, taking us in to the classical era. The Colossus of Rhodes is a standard wonder, and its unique effect, to be honest, is pretty lackluster. Militia are not lost during sieges. So normally during a siege, if your city was under siege, your militia, those peasants who live within your city and will come out and fight for you, would gradually be lost over time. The Colossus of Rhodes prevents that. To be honest, if you are relying on your militia to defend your cities, you've probably gone wrong, and maybe instead of building the Colossus of Rhodes, you should use that industry to build some proper units. The Colossus of Rhodes for me is a very hard sell. A very hard sell. Its unique effect is very average, it's not a holy site. I think it's one of the worst wonders in the game, and for that reason, it is our first hard fail for me. Avoid it at all costs. Next, we have the Lighthouse of Alexandria, a standard wonder with an interesting unique effect. It provides plus 5 vision range. Woof! That is a lot of vision range. You will rule the seas in particular with this bad boy. Also on naval and embarked units, you receive 1 additional combat strength and 2 naval movement speed. The Lighthouse of Alexandria really, in my opinion, has 2 powerful use cases. The first, obviously, you will dominate the seas with extra vision, combat strength, and speed. The second, though, it can be very useful to help you explore and find the new world. Those extra 2 naval movements are crucial for your early embarked units in particular, which can't move very far in the ocean. 2 tiles. Normally, now you can move 4. That may help you bridge the gap across those dangerous ocean tiles to find additional new worlds and islands to explore. I think actually for that reason, the Lighthouse of Alexandria is a very good, universal wonder. Granted though, naval units, particularly later in the game, tend to be less utilized, particularly in Humankind where we tend to favor land-based combat, and a lot of the naval units can't strike units or cities on land. However, overall, it's a pretty good, universally adoptable, fairly strong wonder. It reminds me a lot of the Temple of Artemis in that respect, and therefore I will be ranking it at a B tier. However, I'm going to place it above the Temple of Artemis. As with my other tier lists, my cultural tier lists, if you haven't seen them, link in the doodly-doo, I will rank things in order within their tiers as well. So you can kind of see a 1 through 10, or in this case, much more than that, ranking for the wonders too. Next up, we have the Mausoleum of Halicarnassus, and the devilish science followers of this wonder will know it's incredibly strong. Of note, it's one of the wonders that's been messed with the most since the release of Humankind. Initially, it provided a percentage boost to science, however now this standard wonder provides +2 science on districts and cities and outposts. This is still an incredibly powerful ability. And I've been thinking about this a bit. Okay, so it used to provide a percentage boost, which was great in the late game, but not as good in the early game when you build it. Now it provides +2 science per district. That's all districts, by the way, not just research quarters. That makes it much more powerful in the early game, where a percentage boost is nowhere near as good, right? You might be generating 100 science, that would have only been 1 additional. However, now you're getting 2 additional science on every district. The Mausoleum of Halicarnassus is a wonderful wonder. The +2 science is really actually difficult to replicate in almost any other way in this early stage. You're probably only just getting your research quarters. There are very few scientific cultures, in fact 1 in each of the first 2 eras. The Mausoleum of Halicarnassus is a wonderful way to generate fast science, and it continues to scale throughout the game as you build more districts. It therefore aligns well with getting, say, your builder stars and so on and so forth. The Mausoleum of Halicarnassus, as far as I'm concerned, is an S-tier, best-tier wonder, and one of my must-picks for most playthroughs. It's universally good. Next up, we have a bit of a spicy one, oft overlooked. It's the statue of Zeus. This is also a holy wonder, so it acts as a holy site, as well as those standard benefits. Its unique effect provides +5% money, so it's scalable, per alliance on Empire. You may or may not be playing an alliance-heavy game, but you can probably pick up 1 or 2 regardless with those distant empires, whether you're fighting people or not. It provides +10 stability on cities and outposts. Nice to have, particularly early on. And that's kind of it. This is a fairly generic and, to be honest, a bit of a lackluster wonder. The +5% money per alliance on Empire does scale better over time, but in the early game it's not particularly useful and may not be worth the 2,800 industry it requires to produce. Maybe you're better off just building some of your own market quarters and relying on them to generate extra gold. It does count as a holy site as well, so we have to factor that in. But overall, the statue of Zeus is fairly lackluster. I tend to rank it, because of a slight reliance on you building alliances, a little lower than I would with others. For me, this is a sort of a B-C tier wonder. I'm going to just place it at the B tier, but I want to really stress this is a really close call for me. It is very similar to Stonehenge as far as I'm concerned, in terms of its overall power level and usefulness. Surging our way through into one of my favourite eras in Humankind, the medieval era. This is the Angkor Wat! One of my favourite wonders to play with on stream. Let me tell you why. It is a standard wonder, but also a holy wonder, so you get that extra faith and stability from it. Its unique effect aside from that is very simple. +1 food per faith. It of course generates faith innately, right? It's a holy wonder, so you're innately getting 20, so there's at least 20 food. But let's be real, by this point you've probably built 1 or 2 holy sites, you've probably built 1 wonder before it. So at a base level it's generating around 80 food. Combine that with the fact that you're probably generating at least a little bit of faith in other ways, and you're likely to pick up a lot more as the game continues, with more holy sites, with more wonders, and potentially cultures and emblematic districts that are giving you a little bit of faith on the side as well. Angkor Wat is an incredible wonder because the food generation that you get from it is outstanding, and it combines well with faith. It's actually also, at the moment, one of the few ways to continue to see benefit from faith. And that really, really matters. People often complain that as the game goes on, faith feels a bit basic or a bit useless. I argue actually faith is very strong. Couple that with a continued generation and extracting more yields from your faith. As far as I'm concerned, Angkor Wat is an incredibly powerful wonder. Very, very nearly S tier. However, it does require a bit of synergy with faith, and if you don't have your own religion, it is a little bit weaker than others because you can't structure your religion in a way to really get the most benefit from it. However, its overall useful benefit does not require your faith generation to be generated from your own religion. And it is for that reason that I do comfortably rank Angkor Wat as an S tier, best tier wonder. Next up, we have the Forbidden City, and I think we're calling it forbidden for a reason. Let's take a look. It is a standard wonder, so just 20 stability and 100 fame as normal. It is not a holy site. Its unique effect is plus 25 war support gained when going to war. What? That's it? Plus 25 war support? So, less than what a militarist culture would get from purely just existing. Plus 25 war support is impressive, but realistically, if you're pushing grievances and demands or skirmishing with an enemy, you can probably generate an additional 25 war support. However, of course, this is worth noting that it is 25 war support above the base level. So if you're going into a war with 50, you'll immediately surge up to 75. This is useful for prolonged wars, or wars where you feel you're likely to be taking some losses and losing some war support. Of course, overall, it's not particularly useful for wars where you're really a hard aggressor, except for some niche use cases where your opponent may only have 1 or 2 cities and you struggle to generate war support. To be honest, it doesn't even count as a whole. If it counted as a holy site, it would at least be a little bit better. Forbidden City, you are forbidden. It's a fail from me. Next up, we have actually a DLC wonder, so some of you may not be able to play it. It was part of the Notre Dame DLC pack that launched with the game, so those of you who got the pre-order or the extended edition or what have you will have it. So let's include it here. Notre Dame is a standard wonder that is also a holy wonder, so you get those additional benefits. What does it provide other than that? Well, it provides +1 faith per researched technologies. That is a nice impact. It is, don't get me wrong. And it combos well, obviously, with something like Angkor Wat. If you can pick up both of them, that's great. But overall, you're probably only looking at maybe an additional, at the time of building it, let's say 20, and then toward the end of the game, I don't know, let's say 40 or 50. It's a relatively limited amount of faith generation that can't scale. However, it is, granted, an additional way to generate faith. I don't think, though, that's particularly strong. The only other thing to note about Notre Dame, and this is kind of an extra for experts note, but I'm going to put it in here regardless, there is a exclusive, unique event pathway with Notre Dame that can allow you to unlock an additional 50 fame and a bit of extra money. Or, if you choose to demolish it, you can destroy Notre Dame and get a whole load of money and overproductivity, or you can choose to militarize it and essentially turn it into a fort. It does have a little bit more flexibility in that regard, but overall, it's not a particularly strong wonder. Yes, it's a holy site. Yes, it can generate you some faith. But that's kind of it. And to be honest, the faith generation isn't even that extreme. If it was a multiplier increase, it would be, but at a flat +1 per research tech, it's not that great. It's not a hard fail for me because it does have those nuances. You can generate more faith from it, and it counts as a holy site, but it's not particularly strong, and for that reason, I'm ranking it a C tier wonder. Next up, we have Todai-ji, one of my favourite medieval wonders, but not because it's particularly strong. It is a holy wonder, so it provides those extra benefits, but its unique effect is, to be honest, rather lackluster. Plus 20% time on turns, so it takes 20% longer for your cities to be converted to another religion, a foreign religion. That is a nice benefit, but let's be real. If your cities are being converted, that 20% extra time, say it's going to take 10 turns, now it takes 12, are those extra 2 turns going to be long enough for you to do something meaningful to prevent your cities from being converted? I argue no. Sure, it's great to hold off the opponent for a little bit, but if their faith output is beating yours, they're gonna beat you regardless. And the 20% extra time to hold them off is not long enough, considering the limited available options to generate faith in humankind overall. It is for that reason, I'm afraid, Todai-ji, you are, I'm sorry to say, a fail for me, but it's a really close call. I consider Todai-ji to be relatively on par with Notre Dame in terms of its power level. For that reason, I'll be ranking it at the top of fail, just bordering Notre Dame. Now let's change gear and shift into the early modern era with Machu Picchu. What a wonder it is. This is a standard wonder. It doesn't count as a holy site, but its unique effect is outstanding. All of your other cities, that is, all of your other cities where Machu Picchu was not built, gain food equal to 50%, half of the food produced by Machu Picchu's city. So if you have a city that's earning, let's say, 2,000 food, and you build Machu Picchu in it on a mountain, it does require a mountain, you shouldn't struggle to find one, then all of your other cities receive half of that food generation, 1,000 food each. Machu Picchu is outstanding, and even if you haven't focused down agrarian cultures, even if you have to build it in maybe your second choice because your first choice doesn't have a mountain, the fact that you can connect territories and cities to create mega cities as the game moves on allows Machu Picchu to scale at an unprecedented rate. 50% food spread across all of your other cities for each and every one of them is so incredibly strong. Machu Picchu is an S tier, best tier wonder, and honestly, I'm going to rank it pretty high up in the rankings. I just think that food generation is so powerful for population, for military units, for growth, for jobs. In many ways, it's so strong, you have to be a little bit careful it doesn't go too off the chains in the later game. Machu Picchu, an outstanding wonder and an S tier. Next up, we have St. Basils Cathedral. This is, of course, a holy wonder, and it also provides an additional +1 faith per district. As far as I'm concerned, this is much better than Notre Dame's effect. Particularly at this point in the game, it scales much better, and overall, getting +1 faith on your districts is a really nice way to generate a bit of extra faith. Is it anything to write home about? Probably not. But if you can combine it with some other wonders that you've already got, obviously there are some very powerful synergies here. As far as I'm concerned though, faith is one of the weaker mechanics in Humankind, but it's a really important one across these cultural wonders. So I do value it slightly higher than I value it in, say, my culture tier lists, where I'm comparing cultures based on their strength. It is for that reason that I place St. Basils Cathedral in the middle of the road. Sure, it generates faith, but it reliably generates faith, and it generates it on districts. Therefore, there are very few preconditions to get benefit out of St. Basils Cathedral. But again, the only thing that's holding it back is how beneficial is faith for you? It may be super beneficial, it may not be. It is for that reason that I'm placing St. Basils Cathedral right here at the average tier with the rest of these boys, but right at the end. I do think it's weaker than some of the more powerful benefits that, say, the Lighthouse of Alexandria gains, where the Lighthouse of Alexandria is much closer to A tier, St. Basil's much closer to C tier. Next, we have the Taj Mahal. This standard wonder has a very interesting and potentially super powerful unique effect, plus 50% money on calm cities. Calm cities are those that are in the top tier of stability, 90% or greater. The place where you want to be, because that provides essentially twice as much influence on your cities that you would otherwise be generating if you were lower than 90% in that middle threshold of stability. Plus 50% money is very strong. It's a percentage increase, so it will scale much better over time as well. Honestly, like if your city's generating 2,000 gold, all of a sudden it's generating 3,000, say you've got 5 cities, it's a lot of extra money, and the only precondition is that you keep your stability high. That may not always be achievable though, okay? Stability is relatively easy to pick up, particularly if you're trading luxury resources. You can build it within cities with garrisons or commons quarters, but really you're looking for those scalable impacts of building wonders, of luxuries and trades and wondrous effects, probably to generate a lot of your stability. You can also get it, of course, with civics. Anyway, this is not about how to generate stability, it's about how viable is it to have your cities at 90% and above. I think for the most part, it's fairly viable. However, of course, there are those niche cases where maybe you're in a prolonged war, maybe your districts have been bombarded by artillery strikes, your wonders have been taken or destroyed. Potentially, as well, a big one is cultural osmosis and civics osmosis. That can be a real cost, a real burden on your stability. Overall, though, I think that the effects of the Taj Mahal are very strong. It's a difficult one for me to place because of that stability qualifier. For me, I consider it to be around the A to B tier level of strength. I'm going to rank it above the Lighthouse of Alexandria, but below the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. I do, however, rank it as an A tier wonder. I think that plus 50% money generation is very, very, very good. And the 90% stability qualifier isn't too difficult to manage. Next up in the early modern era, we have the Topkapi Palace. This is a really interesting one, and I think people might sleep on it a bit too much. It's a standard wonder with some industrial unique effects. These are actually pretty rare. You may have noted so far, really the only one that's given us any direct industry anyway is the Pyramid of Giza. So what does the Topkapi Palace do? Well, it provides a generic plus 5% industry boost on city or outpost. That is a percentage increase, so it tends to be better than, say, plus 1 industry on district. It really does ramp up well over time, and it has another ability, plus 100% industry, i.e. double industry, towards shared project construction. That is all future holy sites, all future cultural wonders, and national projects. So if you're trying to go to space, or launch some satellites, or test some nuclear weapons, you can do that twice as fast. The Topkapi Palace, therefore, is a very powerful wonder that provides a generic industry boost, and you'll double the pace with which you produce those shared projects. As far as I'm concerned, the Topkapi Palace is another S-tier, best-tier wonder within the early modern era, so you might want to save up some extra influence as you roll through into the early modern, because these abilities are very, very strong. I'm going to place it around the middle of the road. I would note these are all very close together, by the way, and it's generally only circumstance that may lift one up or drop one back, right? I can sort of shuffle them around kind of like this and feel pretty good about where they are, and toss and turn between them. Moving into humankind's second last wondrous era, the industrial era, we have the Statue of Liberty. It's a standard wonder that has a unique effect providing plus 10, not percentage, but plus 10 money and plus 10 science per number of territories within your sphere of influence. Noting that is not territories you control, but rather those tiers that are within your societal influence on the civics and society screen. Plus 10 money, plus 10 science. Okay, so let's say we're playing on a standard map in a standard game where our territories are within our influence, but we haven't managed to capture everyone else's. I think that's a good average condition to view it on, right? Obviously, the extreme is you have all the territories, and at the other end, you have none. So the Statue of Liberty can basically provide you with almost nothing, or it could provide you, in theory, with 10 money and 10 science for all territories in the game if you had that dream condition. But in most cases, you're probably going to be looking at 10 money and 10 science on your territories. Maybe you control 10 to 12, it's generating 120 money and 120 science, in that case, in the industrial era. To be honest, I find that a bit of a hard sell. I do find that a bit of a hard sell. Granted, in special cases where your sphere of influence dominates the globe, you could be generating, say, 400 science and 400 money. But even then, I mean, it's not a percentage multiplier. I don't think it's that strong, and for that reason, I rank the Statue of Liberty around the B to C tier points. I'm going to rank it at a high C tier. Next up, we have the Big Chongus himself, the Big Bon. It's Big Ben. Big Ben is a standard wonder that has a unique effect, providing plus 5% science per alliance on your empire. A nice multiplier. Of course, it does require the precondition that you have an alliance, but it scales. So if you have 10. If you have 8 alliances, then you get 8 times the ability, but it also provides, thankfully, a generic boost plus 10% science on the capital. That is probably better than the science that you could generate from the Statue of Liberty alone, right? Alone. Let alone the fact that if you've got some alliances, you can do even better. Big Ben is actually a really great scientific wonder, and the plus 10% science generation on capital is great. Of course, it does rely on you having a reasonably sized capital, or at least some scientific specialization within it. That's probably doable, though, if you can attach some territories. Even shifting your capital could be worth doing if you haven't heavily invested in it with wonders already. I think Big Ben is a great wonder that provides a good boost to science. It is a percentage boost, so that scalability throughout the game is key, particularly as we move through into the later eras where science generation really ramps up. It is for that reason, considering Big Ben within the context and within its overall power level, that I rank it at a low A tier. Next up, we have the Eiffel Tower. 2 out of 3 of the wonders within the industrial era of humankind. The Eiffel Tower is a standard wonder that provides plus 1 industry per population on all cities. Now, there are some nuances here. You may not have an empire that has a great population. You may, however, be doing a full agrarian run and have a ludicrous amount of pops. It of course does scale if you take cities, increase your population. There are lots of ways you can scale its ability, but most importantly, it will scale with infrastructure within cities that relies on those workers and so on and so forth. Above all though, it is an Eiffel Tower. It is a wonder that provides industry. Therefore, it can try and pay itself back. It does, of course, count as all of those other generic wonder abilities, but it doesn't count as a holy site. For me, the Eiffel Tower is a slightly difficult one to judge. While it provides a great plus 1 industry, this is not a percentage boost. However, you can scale it a little bit, as I say, with different things within your empire, right? Infrastructure, civics, so on and so forth. However, those are all preconditions. It's worth noting. They are all preconditions, and if we evaluate it at its base power level, it is not quite as strong as you might think. However, I still rate the Eiffel Tower very highly at an A tier wonder, thanks to its ability to really generate some good industry, providing you have certain things already in place. But overall, plus 1 industry per population is a good boost. Next up, we have the Empire State Building as we shift through here into the final era of wonders. Let's go pink for the modern era. The Empire State Building is a standard wonder that generates plus 20% money from all ongoing trade on cities. Now, this is a really difficult one to unpack. It relies on you trading, which you're probably doing with some people at least. It relies on you also having good benefits from ongoing trade. For those unfamiliar, trade is sort of a one and done thing in humankind. You pay money, you get the trade route, you pay one off, and then you have that trade route forever. Then there's a sort of a next tier down where you have to try and add value to ongoing trade. The most common ways to do it tend to be city infrastructures that provide, say, plus 3 gold per trade route. Some civics as well that can provide additional gold per trade. It therefore does require a little bit of specialization to ensure that you get the most benefit out of it. In fact, the precursor that you must be trading isn't too difficult to get, but of course if you go to war or if grievances are triggered and you can't enact more trade routes, it can be a bit stalled. Plus 20% money though is pretty good. The Empire State Building for me is a little bit of a hard sell though, just because it does require trade. If you go to war and take those cities and take those luxuries, then you no longer have those trade routes. There are lots of situations where trade routes ongoing cannot be relied upon. It is for that reason that I rank the Empire State Building at a C tier. It's a good wonder in the right conditions, absolutely, but it's not overall a great pick as far as I'm concerned. Next up, we have the almighty Sydney Opera House. This wonder is a standard wonder that has a very interesting, unique effect. It relies on calm cities, I should note, so it's similar to the Taj Mahal in that way. And what benefit do you get on your calm cities? You get plus 10% food, plus 10% industry, plus 10% money, and plus 10% science. All of the core FIMs, plus 10%. You'll also get plus 20 stability on cities or outposts. A nice little benefit. A flat 20 stability, not a percentage increase, isn't great, but yeah, it's good enough. I mean, at the late game, is 20 stability going to make much of a difference? No. Let's be real, that's probably just a commons quarter. So that is nothing, but the on-calm cities plus 10% across your 4 core FIMs is very good. At this point in the game, I think it's easier to have calm cities. You have many more tools in your arsenal to increase your stability at rapid rates. It is for that reason that I don't consider the calm precondition to be as detrimental as it is for the Taj Mahal. The Sydney Opera House is an absolutely fantastic wonder. Go you, Australia! I rank it right up there at S tier, best tier picks. Absolutely. This thing is a beast. It's a shame it can't be unlocked until so late in the game. That's the only thing actually that causes me to drop it down a little bit when we consider its relative power levels. And last but certainly not least, Christ the Redeemer. Christ the Redeemer is one of the only wonders that also counts as a holy site. It's one of the only holy wonders in the last 2 eras of humankind, actually. It's the only one, of course, in the contemporary era. It provides those additional benefits, right? So it counts as a holy site, so it has those synergies with your tenets, with your civics, so on and so forth. It also provides on all cities plus 10% food, plus 10% industry, and plus 10% money. So in many ways, it's very comparable to the Sydney Opera House. So how does it differ? Well, it doesn't have the calm precondition. Your cities don't need to have any level of stability to get the 10% food, industry, and money. As I said when I was reviewing the Sydney Opera House, this is less important in the later game where you have many more tools to increase your stability. But it's still worth noting that this is a generic effect with no precondition. It does, of course, count as a holy site as well, where the Sydney Opera House does not. So you get a little bit of extra faith, you get that stability, which the Sydney Opera House was giving anyway, so they're fairly even in that regard, but also you get those scalable effects, like plus science on holy sites, or whatever you're getting from them. Overall, Christ the Redeemer is a great wonder. I think it is slightly less powerful than the Sydney Opera House because the 10% science that the Sydney Opera House generates really is incredibly strong in the late game as you surge towards some very powerful technologies. It is for that reason that Christ the Redeemer for me is just slightly below the Sydney Opera House in terms of overall power level, and for me it's a solid A tier pick. Above Big Bon, surely. And that concludes my Humankind Cultural Wonders tier list. What did you think? Do you agree with me? I think, looking through this list, I'm going to cop some flack on this one. Probably these two. Maybe the Lighthouse of Alexandria. Maybe also you might disagree with me on Empire State Building or Stonehenge. Maybe. I feel like those are the ones that you may disagree with me on, but let me know. Where would you rank them? I think overall this is a pretty good tier list. It suggests top picks and not top picks. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.